Good afternoon, everybody. This is Tyler Collier with SmartNet North America. Today we'll be covering the broadcast coordinate update. This is a sizable update that everybody needs to be aware of. It'll have lasting changes and effects on the network. We've got a lot to cover today, so we want to go ahead and get rolling. So today we'll be covering a variety of topics. We'll give you a quick correction services update just to let everybody know where we stand, what's going on, what's happening. Make sure that you're aware of what support resources are available. So as we reference them throughout the rest of the presentation, you'll have an idea of where you can start going to get these support resources. So there's a lot of details in here that will be helpful to you. If it's something specific, we'll call it out that you'll need to I'll look back at the knowledge base, but this will give you at least a primer or introduction to that. We'll talk about coordinates and integrity monitoring, how we actually determine our coordinates, why we're doing what we're doing, and then really the meat and potatoes, the important portion of the webinar is discussing the new realizations, solutions, and reference frames that are being introduced and why we're introducing them. Additional to that, if you need something different than the new reference frames and you need to be able to use the existing coordinates today or a different reference frame or solution, we'll introduce the MRF mount point concept. And then importantly, distill it down to how it affects you particularly. So really try to say, okay, these are the things you need to be concerned with, to pay attention to, keep track of, and how they are going to affect you once this new realization and solutions are introduced on January 6th. And then, of course, along with these changes, being able to look at these coordinates, these new realizations and solutions, and track them to time, and the rework that's coming to the site database to support these activities. And then finally, the important dates that you need to be aware of, a wrap up and questions that you may have. Of course, any time during the presentation, if you do have questions, feel free to ask. We do have staff on to help address those questions, or we will read them out and introduce those questions to the wider audience. If you do have questions, please ask it. This is a great forum to get those questions out and into the public. And at the end, we are recording this webinar so that we'll be able to take those questions. We'll timestamp those questions along with the other presentations that we'll be doing in the coming weeks. Other sessions of the same content, and we'll stitch those all together so you'll be able to not only hear the questions from today, but if you need to revisit and see questions from the other sessions that we'll be conducting on the same topic. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So quick correction service update. By the numbers, 60 plus servers currently in operation, over 1,500 stations now currently in SmartNet with over 1.4 billion acres in coverage. 50 states are now being serviced by SmartNet with 8 Canadian provinces. This means we have coverage in 470 of the top 500 MSAs, about 288 million folks in Canada, in the US, and about 28 million folks in Canada. So by a lot of metrics and measures, the largest service provider on the continent. This is a quick graphic of our coverage as of last month. I haven't quite gotten it updated. There's a few new areas of coverage, a few new densifications, a few new stations, but this is a good primer of where we stand today. Most of the islands, most of the metropolitan areas are covered now, and we'll continue to work on densification, improvements in correction services in areas throughout the U.S. and Canada as we go. Our coverage hasn't changed dramatically in probably the past 12 to 15 months, primarily because we've also been working on an infrastructure upgrade program to try to get us to a full GNSS capability. So we launched GNSS corrections back in 2017. And we've been working to really roll this out on a mass scale. Currently, 100% of SmartNet is GPS and GLONASS capable, meaning that you'll get both the GPS and the GLONASS constellation when connected to the appropriate mount point. And approximately 81% of SmartNet is GNSS capable, meaning GPS L1, L2, L5, GLONASS, Galileo, and Beidou. Beidou's a little more out west as far as availability of satellites goes, but we do have the infrastructure out there that can support it as it becomes a little bit more widely available from a constellation perspective. And these areas, these markets are 100% GNSS capable. So if you are in one of these markets, then you should have GNSS capabilities available to you if you're using the correct mount point. We continue to update this. This is on the support resource portal. So I encourage you can kind of look at this and see over on the support knowledge base. We keep that updated of where we are 100% GNSS. As I said a second ago, to gain access to GNSS, you do have to be using a full GNSS mount point. Those are our MSM mount points. If you're currently not using those, we do encourage you to move over. We currently provide it in 3 flavors: MSM IMAX, MSM Near, and MSM VRS. IMAX is the preferred standard for us. It gives traceability, repeatability back to a real reference station. Near is just a single baseline, a non-network solution to the closest station. Of course, VRS is a virtual reference station product that gives you the ability to do virtual reference stations. All of these were launched in 2017. They are available today. They work with your existing logins. So you just need to change the mount point to be able to use these corrections. All the other connection details remain the same. They are on the production mount points, so they are on, the production ports, so they are on port 10,000. So really all you have to do is update your mount point and you'll be good to go. So support resources. We have a variety of support resources that are available that make sure you can get the information you need when you need it. We have the support portal knowledge base. So you can find this at support.smartnetna.com. This is where you would go to find all these knowledge base articles that I'm going to be referencing, most of which will be pinned directly on the main page, but you'll also be able to search for them by using keywords, which I'll kind of spout off as we go. But this is a great resource that you can use whenever and however you need to self-support or to get additional information that we're talking about today. On top of that, we also have our system status page. If this is something that you haven't used as a reference or as a tool in the past, we encourage you to. We will put out updates on this of changes, maintenance, coordinate updates. Pretty much any large-scale happenings on SmartNet will be posted here so that you can find out the status of the system. This is also outside of our infrastructure, which means very simply that even if something happens to the underlying SmartNet infrastructure, this will be up and available for us to post to, and so you will be able to get the details that you need when you need them. Station status, this is the live status map. This is going to drill down to the station level. System status keeps it much more high level, more at the entire system level. And of course, announcements and miscellaneous information will always go on Twitter. We know not everybody tweets, and on this we also publish it directly on the portal as well in the right-hand column, so that even if you're not using Twitter, you have access to that information. So we encourage you to use these tools to find out about support or about status, and if you also have the ability under support to submit support tickets should you need to. So SmartNet coordinates and integrity monitoring. So we're going to start getting kind of into the meat and potatoes of what we're here to talk about today. In 2012, we adopted the proposed NGS standards for RTK operations for GNSS networks. This was to allow us to make sure that we were operating in a way that was recognized, by NGS as the appropriate way to operate SmartNet. This also gives us the ability to get an accurate tie to the National Spatial Reference System, the NSRS, and at the same time, with some of the other things we do, also allows us to provide the internal integrity between stations that we require, aside from the tie to the NSRS. This is what we've been doing for a long time, and this is one of the reasons that we're here today, because it does require, if we're adopting this, us to tie within 2 centimeters horizontally and 4 centimeters vertically to the NSRS. Historically, we've achieved a tie less than a centimeter X, Y, and Z in the Cartesian space, and to make sure we continue to tie well to the NSRS with this new reference frame or this new realization that's been adopted is the reason that we need to do a broadcast coordinate update. And again, we'll talk about that in excruciating detail as we go. Outside of the US, we also have Canada. We've signed a RTK compliance agreement with NRCan. This was signed by a number of different RTN operators. And again, this is to provide an accurate tie to the NSRS in Canada, and also, again, to provide the internal integrity required. NRCan traditionally requires us to adopt their broadcast coordinates, their coordinates that they derive within a certain or set tolerance. So 97% of the stations for SmartNet are in compliance, but currently we're in V6 in their version 6 solution, which is one of the reasons we're also taking this opportunity as we're updating the realization for the US that we're also going to be updating the solution in Canada. And again, we'll talk about this a little bit more in detail. But these are the two primary drivers, the NGS RTK compliance agreement and the NRCan compliance agreement. These are the two primary drivers for us to look at this broadcast coordinate update. From an integrity monitoring perspective, this is how we kind of wrap everything together. It's also how we position new stations as they're brought on and then evaluate stations on a daily basis. We compute a 7-day average of positions in the reference frame that we're operating in. We have alarming thresholds and update thresholds set. So coordinates of stations must exceed 2.5 centimeters. And I apologize, somebody decided to show up with a leaf blower. Coordinates must exceed 2.5 centimeters resultant threshold for us to alarm. So we start looking at it. So this is in the Cartesian space, centimeter and a half, centimeter and a half, centimeter and a half. And then update thresholds, the coordinates of the station must exceed 3.5 centimeters for us to actually update the coordinates. We take updating broadcast coordinates very seriously because this immediately reflects to our users, and it means that they have immediate results to the vectors that they're using off the reference stations. So we make sure that when we do this, we do it in a structured and precise manner, and this is the reason that we only do it when it achieves a certain tolerance. When that happens, there are other things that happen. Our TCMIDs are updated, site codes could change, and again, all of this is published on the support resource portal of how we do what we do. So you can use that as a reference should you need to. So that's a few housekeeping things out of the way. So we're going to move into the meat and potatoes of things, and I'm going to start talking much, much slower, I promise. I just wanted to get through those things because now we've got quite a few slides to get into the real details of what we're doing today. So we're talking about new realizations here in the US. New solution is typically how NRCan refers to it in Canada, as well as adoption of a new reference frame for physical coordinates or processing coordinates. And so just so we're talking the same language, we actually have 2 full slides of definitions. And this is to make sure as I speak to these points as we go, that there is a frame of reference from which we can, no pun intended, a frame of reference from which we can work from. So processing coordinates. You'll hear me say processing or physical coordinates. These are the physical coordinates of the station on the planet surface relative to, in this case, what we'll be moving to is the ITRF 2014 reference frame. And there's a reason that we have broadcast and physical. Physical is what we actually use to calculate the network corrections. Okay, and this is because the satellites, one of the error sources that we are trying to account for in a network correction is satellite orbital error. Well, satellite orbits are in an IGS reference frame, in the IGS reference frame. So if we were to put them into a NAT83 reference frame, for example, there's a lot of noise that the network would have to fight through to produce a quality network correction. So our backend, our processing, our physical coordinates of the stations are actually calculated in ITRF. We'll talk about that again more in a second. Broadcast coordinates. These are the coordinates that are used for computation of differential baselines between the reference station and the rover. Okay, so this is what we send out to you in the RTCM message that says what what you're calculating your vector off of. So this is what your differential baseline is corrected off of from base to rover. Velocity, you'll hear me refer to this in a number of places today. This is the direction and speed of a station's movement relative to a reference frame. So you can have different velocities relative to a different reference frame, but when we talk about velocities, we're specifically talking about velocities in our physical space, in our physical coordinate space, how it relates to our processing coordinates. You'll hear me say later non-dynamic stations. These are stations that have very low horizontal velocities. You'll hear us say high dynamic stations. These are stations that have high horizontal velocities. You'll hear us say reference frame. This is the coordinate system allowing measurement within that frame. So this is NAT83. This is IGS, ITRF. These are reference frames that you've probably heard of before. You'll hear epoch date. The point in time which a coordinate is referenced, not necessarily calculated, but what it's referenced to. And then you'll hear me say realization and solution. And these kind of can be used interchangeably, but this is basically just an identifier defining when, how, what data was used in the computation of a coordinate or coordinate set. So we'll get into that in a little bit more detail as well, but they can kind of be used interchangeably. In our CAN talks about solutions, typically NGS would typically talk about realizations. So we're getting a couple questions. What is a reference station? What is a reference frame? Those questions, if we're going down that road, a reference frame is simply, like I said, it's the coordinate system allowing measurements between points. So that's what a reference frame is. So if we talk about the coordinate system that I'm operating in, that would be the reference frame. And there's different reference frames in different regional areas, different countries, for different needs. And we have three primary reference frames that we talk about for this in this application, which is on this next slide. IGS 08 was the previous realization of the IGS global reference frame that we were operating in for our physical space, for our physical coordinates. So we are going to be leaving that behind on January 6th. ITRF 2014 is the current realization. You're seeing ITRF and IGS. Those can loosely be used interchangeably. They align very well in a purely technical manner. They're not exactly the same, but for our argument's sake right now, we're just going to treat them as the same type of reference frame. The 08 realization and the 2014 realization is the major difference here. And so ITRF 2014 is what we're moving to, and it's the current realization of the International Terrestrial Reference Frame. And you may ask, why do I care about International Terrestrial Reference Frame? Again, that is what the ephemeral data from the satellites is referenced to, so we have to know what that is. NAT83 is the North American datum of 1983. It's the horizontal coordinate system of the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. So everybody should be familiar with that. NA 2011 is the datum tag for NAT83 that we're currently operating in, which is a point of confusion that we'll talk about a little bit later. MYCS 1 is the multi-year coordinate core solution version 1. This was what was released in 2012. So this is what we are currently operating in today. MYCS 2 is the multi-year core solution version 2, so it's the sequel. It is the one that was just released in September of this year, and this is what we'll be moving to in the US. CSRS is the Canadian Spatial Reference System, so you'll hear me say this a couple times. And NSRS is the National Spatial Reference System. It's a lot of definitions, I know, But I'll talk to them as we move through the presentation. The real keys here are to understand NYCS1 is what we're on now, NYCS2 is what we're moving to. These are the two big ones for the US, and version 6 solution for CSRS and version 7.1 solution for CSRS for Canada is what we'll be moving to in January 6th. So these are the things that you need to remember. This webinar is being recorded, so you will be able to rewatch this should you need to. Question is about the 2014 reference frame, what's happening with NGS in 2022. We're going to save that for the very, very end. We don't have to concern ourselves with that. This is a intermediate step to that, but we'll cover that as we go. So new NGS realizations and reference frames. As I said a second ago, NGS has released the NAT83 NA2011 MYCS2 EPIC 2010 realization. They did this in September. So it is a new realization of the previous reference frame. They've also released GEOID 18, which is tied to this new realization. And they have also released the coordinates for the NGS stations in ITRF 2014, EPIC 2010. And again, EPIC is related to what date that those measurements are referenced to. So these are referenced to EPIC 2010. So we're not changing epics in anything to do with the NAT83, but we are moving from an IGS 08 2005 EPIC to an ITRF 2014 2010 EPIC. So these all make a difference. Why are we doing this now as opposed to when we did our typical fall adjustment? Well, the release was just too late for us to include into the fall adjustment that we did in early November. We just could not take on that late of release of NYCS2 and ITRF 2014. So we're having to now do 3 adjustments on our side in the span of 6 months. January 6, 2020 will be the adoption of these, and I'll cover this again and again and again as we go through for NYCS2 and the ITRF coordinates on the back end. We have received a number of questions about starting to use GEOID 2018. We would not recommend using it until we release the MYCS2, again, the multi-year core solution 2 coordinates in January. They are not relative to one another. It could actually induce error into your solutions, even though the GEOID 2018 is supposed to be a more accurate GEOID model. It's referenced to the old reference frames and coordinates. So to get in a little bit more details, so the newly reprocessed solution, NYCS2, again, is referred to as the multi-year core solution 2. This is from NGS. This is what NGS has processed to get new solutions into the out into the market. They've also aligned to ITRF 2014, which was released a while ago by the international community, by IGS, but they're just now adopting it as of September. This supersedes the previous NYCS1 realization, so we're moving a step further, and it does show some improvements in velocities over NYCS1 because you have a longer time series, more stations, roughly 2,400 versus 1,300 stations, so you get less velocity uncertainties with the new solution. This is also one of the reasons that we're updating because of the changes in velocities. And again, we'll talk about this more in detail. If you want to know more information about NYCS2, how they did it, what they did, all that good jazz, you can see this link right here, ngsnoa.gov, CORS. If you just Google NYCS2, it will literally be one of the top 2 or 3 things that pop up in Google for you. If you are someone that takes geodesy very seriously and you follow NGS very seriously, some of the things I am saying may add a little confusion. And again, I'm sorry, there's somebody mowing a yard outside of my house. Possible confusion. NGS did not update the datum tag. This is actually a screen capture from one of the presentations they did back in late 2011, early 2012 to talk about the new NAT83 NA2011 adjustment that they released in 2012. and they refer to it as a datum tag here. They did not update the naming convention. I have tried to get clarity from NGS on this, but was not able to run anybody down that could get me clarity on this to really understand why they did not update their naming convention. But yet they also, in that link that I mentioned just a second ago, said MYCS2 supersedes the previous reference frame in realization, which was released under the name MYCS1. So there's some mixed messages here. So for clarity, I don't want to get drug into the semantics of is this a superseded reference frame in realization? The way that we read everything else, aside from this one sentence that they put in, that this is a realization update, not a reference frame update. We're still operating in the same reference frame. It's just a new realization, a new solution that has been updated in the existing reference frame. So hopefully we can get some additional clarity about that, and we can put that in a knowledge base article, in the coming weeks. But as of this point, we haven't. So when we talk about this new realization, we're just going to talk about it as NAT 83, NA 2011, MYCS2, EPIC 2010. Really great naming convention, I know. Really confusing, I understand. But when we talk about it, we'll really just talk about MYCS1 and MYCS2. But for our purposes, when you see it called out in our documentation going forward, this is what you're going to see. All right. In Canada, NRCan releases an annual solution for all the stations. And again, both with NGS and NRCan, with NGS, we tie to the NSRS within a certain tolerance. With NRCan, technically, we're supposed to broadcast the coordinates that they provide us for those stations within a certain tolerance. So NRCan is about to release their version 7.1 solution. Typically, this will be released in late January. We're getting ours a little bit early so that we can include it in the January 6th adjustment. So we're not doing two different adjustments on two different timescales for our two different user sets. So they are releasing this a little early to us so that we can have it, so we can have that version 7.1 to introduce into the market. NRCan also earlier this year released ITRF 2014 for their stations and our stations, so that we can use those as part of this as well. So what does this mean for SmartNet users? This means a coordinated release for concurrent adoption with what we're doing with in the US as well as Canada. And it means on January 6th, we will be adopting version 7.1 and ITRF coordinates in Canada as well. The multi-year solution will be for 7.1 is through GPS week 2077. So this is basically they take all the solutions for all the weeks of our stations and produce a broadcast coordinate for us with all of those combined. So they get tighter and tighter over time. Version 7 was released at the beginning of 2019. I believe. So 7.0 solution was released then. We've been working on 6.0 because that's when we adopted the NRCan solution. So we've been working in 6.0 for a number of years now. I'd have to go back and look. But 7 solution over 6 solution, longer time series, new stations filling in previous coverage gaps. This means an improved velocity model or improved velocity field. And this basically means we can more accurately propagate coordinates between epochs. So if we have an epoch date of one or another, we can propagate between those much better because we have more accurate velocities. Again, velocities are how much a station moves relative to a reference frame. NRCan has a great website as well that talks about this. It's a really long website here, but we will have links to this in the knowledge base article that we'll be publishing so that you can find if you want to learn more about the version 7 solution, and I'm sure they'll update it for version 7.1 when that is released. They will be releasing the 7.1 version for our stations to coincide with our release on the network as well. So we have that agreement with NRCan, so that'll be happening in and around the same time. Might not be the exact same day, but it'll be within the week or so of our adjustment going live. So that's a lot of stuff. I understand that. And we're going to dig deeper and deeper into this and either confuse you more, or hopefully to clarify things so that you have a little bit better grasp of what's going on. So broadcast coordinate adjustment. When is it going to happen? Well, execution plan has been completed. We're done. The plan has been put together. Preparations have been finished. We've already done all our preparations. Data collection has been conducted. We've already collected all the data that's going to be used in the adjustment. We've done some initial processing runs to get some, some real, I say gross, some gross ideas of the total effects on the network, just to get a idea in preparations of this webinar series. So that has been completed, so we can talk to it a little bit, not in station by station detail, but we have a rough idea. Final processing is underway. It actually starts, I think it started this morning, or it will start tomorrow, one of the two. So this is basically 2 weeks of data, and we'll talk about that in a second. Once the final processing is done, we will QA and QC the new coordinates. So this is a large undertaking where we look at to see if we have any flyers, any outliers, anything that doesn't quite look right. This one will be a little bit more challenging because we don't have a long-term frame of reference to look at. So every time that we do coordinates, we do our adjustments, we're always looking at what did things look like last time, just to see as a sanity check. So we'll have to do some other sanity checks this time to make sure that what we're publishing is the gold standard. And then the final step is actually publishing the coordinates. So when does this happen? We will take the network offline and we'll begin publishing and roll out of these coordinates on January 5th, 2020 at 10 p.m. Eastern time. This means just as we do with our typical spring and fall solutions, we go offline at 10 p.m. On a night and then turn things back on so that they're published that next morning. So on January 6th is when you will start seeing the new coordinates be available to you for use. And these will affect you. So please continue to pay attention to what we're saying in this webinar. Skip that one. We really don't need to do that one. I should have taken it out. Sorry. So processing coordinates. So you heard me say processing or physical coordinates. These are traditionally computed on a semi-annual basis, so twice a year. And we continue to update those processing coordinates to make sure that we have the best tie to the reference frame which the satellites are operating in. So this is something that we're always doing. This happens every fall and every spring, or now when there's a realization or a solution transition. So we'll be doing this again on the 6th. So all processing coordinates have an epic that are published on SmartNet portal. So for example, right now the epic is 2019-750, but we'll be moving to ITRF 2014 with the epic of 2020. Now, at the end of the day, these are transparent to you as the end user. You do not see these. When we change these do not affect you immediately in the field. They're not immediately reflected to you if you're a traditional RTK survey, construction, GIS type application. If you're in some of the newer applications, this could possibly affect you. But if I'm just doing survey work, when we update these coordinates, it doesn't affect you, except for it improves our ability to deliver a quality network correction. But as far as reflected to your measurements directly, it doesn't. But we want to talk about it so you know what's going on. These are transparent to you guys. We'll be currently in IGS 08 is what we're in 2019-750, and we'll be transitioning to the new ITRF 2014 realization to get in alignment with everything else that's going on globally. So we're currently 2019-750. These new ones will be published on January 6th. So it'll be ITRF 2014, EPIC 2020. We will then return to our standard spring and fall cadence. So again, in April, May timeframe, we'll adjust to the ITRF 2014, EPIC 2020 250, and so on and so forth as we go through time, just like we have in the past. But again, when we update these, they're not reflected to you as a user, except for improving the quality of the network correction. The things that do affect you is when we really change or update the broadcast coordinates. And we compute these on a semi-annual basis as well. Our California users know that we adjust these semi-annually in spring and fall, so those broadcast coordinates are immediately reflected to our users in the field. We evaluate these on an annual basis for British Columbia, Louisiana, Oregon, and Washington. British Columbia, Oregon, and Washington based on the horizontal movement possibility, Louisiana based on possible subsidence movement. We've only had to do Oregon and Washington once every 2 to 3 years, but we'll take this opportunity. I think the last time we did it was 2018. So we will take the opportunity to update to 2020 here as well. All non-dynamic stations, meaning all stations in SmartNet, are evaluated. Well, they're really evaluated on a daily basis, but really hardcore evaluation on an annual basis to make sure that there's nothing really out of sort. And then unplanned updates happen after seismic events or large displacements are discovered. The Ridgecrest earthquake in California that just happened a couple of months ago. We are always looking to see what things look like. We were close enough to the fall adjustment that I don't think we made any changes, but this is something that we look at. Or if we find large displacements, if something triggers an alarm and we try to figure out what's going on, then we'll try to do that. And then when there's a new NSRS realization released by the governing agency, so NGS in the US or NRCan in Canada. This is when we would do processing coordinate updates, and this is what we're doing and talking about today is the new realizations, new solutions. So for a vast majority of our users, they're using non-dynamic stations. Okay, so they are going to get NAT83 NA 2011 with the new update MYCS2 and EPIC 2010. And for our vast majority of our Canadian customers, they'll get NAT83 CSRS version 7.1 EPIC 2010 on the standard mount points. So this is what you will be moving to. That's the current, that's the common EPIC with the current class. We'll talk about classes and EPICs in a second, but this is what we'll be moving to. So we're moving from MYCS1 for the US to MYCS2, so there will be a change in coordinates. And in Canada, we're moving from version 6.0 to version 7.1. So again, there could be a change in coordinates to the broadcast that you receive to calculate your baselines off of. In our high dynamic areas in California, we will be moving from EPIC 2019 750 to EPIC 2020 to EPIC 2020, again from MYCS1 to MYCS2. You probably won't see quite as dramatic a difference in California as you could in some other areas, amazingly enough, simply because the velocity fields and velocity models in California are relatively dense to begin with. So we don't expect gigantic changes because we just did one like literally less than right at 2 weeks ago. Washington will be moving from EPIC 2018 to EPIC 2020, again, MYCS1 to MYCS2. And then the Canadian high dynamic areas. Technically, we don't have any stations broadcasting in high dynamic areas in Canada because everything's been relatively stable for our stations in British Columbia for a bit now. So this really isn't applicable, but we keep it open just in case we need to do it. For example, again, California will be published on January 6th. Broadcast coordinate of the stations will be NAT83 NA 2011, MYCS2, EPIC 2020. But all you guys care about, after everything I've said, is how much can we expect coordinates to change? Well, coordinates may change as little as 5 millimeters. So you won't even see it in the noise. Friday, Monday morning, your cruise, recovery from the weekend will be more noise than that 5 millimeters. But it may change in excess of 5 centimeters in some areas. This is not location dependent or area dependent. This is station dependent. This could literally be from one station to the next station. So this is not an insignificant change if we are in and around or excess of 5 centimeters. So we will publish a knowledge base article with all stations requiring greater than what our prescribed tolerance is, which is 35 millimeters. We will produce a knowledge base article with every station that has that, along with a map that shows them on the map, unless that's a long list of stations. We don't expect it to be, but again, we haven't finished the final adjustment, so we won't know for a couple of weeks still. Next question is, what are causing these large changes on some stations and small on others? Did you just had crap coordinates before? No, it has nothing to do with the quality of the solution, the quality of coordinates before. It has to do with a couple of different things. One is the changes in the velocity model in some areas can dramatically affect the position as we move reference frames and epochs. So you saw the epochs. We went from IGS 2005 was the published epoch. And now we're at 20. We'll be at 2020. So that's 15 years of motion that we're changing for, and updating from 2005 to 2010. That's a 5-year change, but we're still another 9 years, 10 years out from that. So velocities have changed because of more data, because of a better velocity model. You've actually seen where stations flip velocities, where they were negative in a direction and now they're positive in another direction. Was that real? Is that a real change in velocity? No, not necessarily a real change in velocity, but because this station was now a measured velocity as opposed to a modeled velocity for a real station, it can have appreciable impacts, even if it's only like 2 or 3 millimeters. If we're changing the velocity of a station by 2 or 3 millimeters and we're projecting it 10 years, that means that's a 2 or 3 centimeter change in position than what we had before. So those are, these millimeter level changes in velocities because of better velocity models can make an appreciable difference on the actual station broadcast coordinates. So these are things that we have to play with. It also means it's one of the reasons that we're going to have challenges as we move forward, maintaining some of the solutions we have to allow you a transition period. Stations may have also been brought online with preliminary solution, a 7-day solution instead of what we would consider our precise 14-day solution with precise ephemeris when it was originally commissioned. This shouldn't be a gigantic difference in position, honestly. We did a mad science project a number of years ago to look at the quality of a 14-day precise solution versus a 28-day average solution, or a 14-day average solution, or a 7-day average solution with just a rapid ephemeris. And there was statistically not much difference in it, but it can be a few millimeters here, a few millimeters there, which can add up over time. So we want to make sure that we address these as we go. And you're probably going to ask again, so why are you changing the broadcast coordinates? Again, there's a lot of reasons. These are the main three. Assure compliance with the governing bodies. So for the realization or solution. So NGS, we want to make sure we're on NYCS 2. With NRCan, we want to make sure we're on version 7.1, so we remain in compliance with those two organizations. To assure consistency of between other stations with these new velocity models. We need to make sure the consistency between new stations and old stations remains possible. Right now, if we bring a new station online and we're using these new velocity models, then we can't assure that new station with this new coordinate calculated with these new velocities is actually going to fit with the old station. And so this is a challenge, and we always want to improve the footprint that we have available. So we need to make sure as we bring on new stations that they can fit together with the old stations in a common reference frame. And if those velocities are how the velocities are computed for one is different than the other, it can have a massive impact on how those two stations fit together. It also allows us to make sure from an integrity monitoring perspective, the internal consistency is improved with this update so that we can catch errors or catch blunders or catch things before they affect you as the user. And then lastly, we haven't updated broadcast coordinates in mass in 7 years. So right now we're carrying 7 years of possible localized movement or deformation. Has nothing to do with the quality of the coordinates that were calculated, because every spring and fall when we look at coordinates, we see a delta. We see a difference between the new calculated processing or broadcast coordinates and the old ones. Some of those times they're in the 3, 4, 5 mil range. Some of those times they're in the 2 centimeter range. And that can be noise. That could be a change in how we had to perform an adjustment because one of the control stations that we used previously has gone offline, and we've now had to use another one, and its station coordinates were just a little bit different than what we thought they should be. So all of these things play into account when you start talking about broadcast coordinates. And so we wanted to start with a clean slate for 2020 to adopt these two new solutions and realizations, and to take care of all of these things that build up over time. And then again, we'll be having to go through this again in about 2 or 3 years when we start talking about the new NGS reference frame, which again we'll talk about towards the back end. But what if I need something different, Tyler? What if I don't want to move? What if I don't want to change? Well, for that, if you have a long-term project, you have something that you need some time to transition on, we've got a way to do this for you. So in fall of 2017, we introduced the ability to broadcast multiple reference frames. This allows the seamless ability for a customer to fit customer requirements or compliance requirements. Traditionally, high dynamic areas and legal requirements were the two uses of our MRF mount points. But now with a new realization or solution transition, this is also something that we can use it for as well. So with this is one reason we can have this ability. So to stay within standards of compliance with governing bodies with NGS, with the move from NYCS1 to NYCS2 for realization, we may need to have different coordinates that are available for one particular station, or as we go from NAT83 NA 2011 EPIC 2010 to the new NATRF 2022 datum. We're not doing that today, guys. Don't freak out. That's a long time. Not a long time, 2 or 3 years from now. So that's not what we're doing today. But it will allow us the ability to transition between those two datums back and forth relatively painlessly, or with NRCan as we go from version 6, which we're on today, to version 7.1 as a solution. So all of these things are awesome for MRFs, for multiple reference frames. We also have it to allow for movement between current, last, or common epic. So this is what we've done in California for 2+ years now, which is have both the last epic available. So in this case, as we move to MICS2 EPIC 2020, we will also have MICS1 EPIC 2019 275 or 750 available, or same thing in Washington. We also have the current, common, and the last as well. Or in British Columbia, where we have governmental requirements based on the Surveyor General's circular letter. We have Vancouver Island having to be in 1997 EPIC, and BC mainland being in 2002 EPIC. So both of these things can be handled with multiple reference frames. So how do we do this? How do you access reference frames? How do we talk about them? Well, first, we have to break it up into classes. And you've kind of heard me talk about this just briefly. When we talk about realization solutions, datum transitions, or high dynamic areas, we have to have what we have current. So that's what we're broadcasting today. We may have to have what's common. So the common reference frame, the common NSRS. So, for the U.S. purposes, that's NA 2011, now NYCS2, EPIC 2010. We may have to have the last, so the last EPIC that we broadcast. So in California, that would be like 2019 750. Right now it's 2019 250 because we're not quite there yet. And now we've had to add one, which is last common, because we will have an MICS1 for anybody that's still using, that's currently using the EPIC 2010 in California. We give you a path to get those same coordinates still again, but we also have to have the current adopted standard as well. And legal requirements, we talk about them as common, alternate 1, alternate 2, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you've seen these mount points, they are kind of sort of explanatory, I guess. So with multiple reference frames, we actually have a set of coordinates that are attached to that station for that particular mount point that it's broadcasting on. So we have these specialized mount points that have an indicator that talk about what they are. So you can see this is a big long mount point that has a lot of characters in it, but it kind of spells it out, hopefully in rather plain language. And if it doesn't, we have a lot of support articles that go in detail about it. So here's how they're structured. So MSM, that's the correction format. That's pretty simple. So that's a GNSS correction format. Correction type is for us IMAX, so that I'm connected to an IMAX network correction here. The realization is what frame of reference that we're working from there, what solution we're working from there. So this is if I was looking for NYCS1 solution or realization, and then the EPIC 2010. In Canada, same thing, correction format, MSM, correction type, IMAX, and the solution, CSRS v6.0. Okay. If I'm in California, I might see MSM, I might see IMAX, NYCS1, 2019-750. Okay, so this is correction format, correction type, realization. Sorry, that should say realization there, and EPIC. So it's a lot of stuff, Tyler. What do I have available to me? Pretty simple. Production mount points will be moved to MYCS2. So anything that you're currently using today, RTCM3 underscore blah, MSM underscore IMAX near VRS, whatever, those will be moved to MYCS2. Okay, so we're just going to start broadcasting that current realization on January 6th. If you need to go back to the coordinates that we are broadcasting right now in a majority of the United States, you will need to change your mount point. And we're going to belabor this point as we go. So you will need to go to the last EPIC or the last reference frame, and that will be RTCM3, whatever your preferred correction type, MYCS1 underscore 2010. Okay, and that's on a different port so that you can't get confused. If you want to go get that mount point, you have to go to a different port in your configuration, and that will have the current today coordinates. So we'll start broadcasting on January 6th, the new coordinates, the new broadcast coordinates, and we'll continue to broadcast the old coordinates for a period of time. Okay, so these will be available starting very soon. We'll talk about that in a second. RTCM3 underscore your correction type will be moved to MYCS2. So you will be moved. If you do not change your mount points, you will automatically be moved to the new realization. But we are giving you a way to go back to the current today, as of right now, coordinates that you're accustomed to working off of with MYCS1. In Canada, same thing holds. We will be moving to the new solution on the current mount points, RTCM3. Will be moved to version 7.1. Still, again, same EPIC 2010 for a majority of Canada. And then we'll also have CSRS v6.0 available as a multi-reference frame mount point on port 1111. So if you need to use the old mount points, you will need to the old coordinates, you will need to make sure you choose one of these mount points. For both MYCS1 and CSRS v6, these mount points will be deprecated on the release of the spring 2020 adjustment. Okay, this may cause some confusion of why are you doing this? Why can't you just leave these up and I can continue to operate on these old coordinates as long as I want to? Because it goes back to the possible discontinuities in the velocity model, velocity grid between the new and old coordinate stations as new stations are brought online. So if we continue to hold these open and leave these open forever as we bring on new stations, either one of two things has to happen. One, we have to try to produce the old coordinates, which we can't do because the velocities have been updated, so there's no real good way to do that, or we don't bring those new stations into the solution, which again causes other problems. So we're going to give a transition period so spring 2020. When that adjustment is published, both the CSRS v6 and the MYCS1 mount points will be deprecated. They'll be turned off and they will not be available going forward. So you'll need in that 3 to 4 month time period, start making that transition to the new solution if you need to. So this just belabors the points. If I'm looking on my ports, here's what I would typically see on current. I'd see just on port 10,000, I would see just the current. On port 11, I would see common, 1111, or on last, I would also see the MYCS1 2019-750, MYCS1 2018. So this is what I'm going to see when I open up source table on these mount points. So pretty self-explanatory. If it doesn't call out MYCS1, then it's an MYCS2 solution, because we're moving to the new solution on all of the mount points. And one of the reasons we're doing this on the mount points and not putting an indicator MYCS2 is that if we did that, then basically on January 6th, everybody's systems would be broken. Like you guys are awesome because you're here. A lot of you guys are here, but there's a lot of people that aren't. So literally, if we launch this and we said, okay, we're taking these old RTCM3 _ IMAX mount points offline completely because they don't call out if it's MYCS1 or MYCS2, then everybody's system would be broken. It would be a very bad day for support. So we're going to drag everybody along. We're going to put them on the new realization on the current mount points, but we're giving people a way to get to the current today coordinates should they need to for a transition period. In California, it gets a little bit more confusing, a little bit more complex, because you got current, common, last common. Again, if you don't see MYCS1 in the call out here, then that means it's going to be a MYCS2 solution. Again, port 10,000, which is a vast majority of our users, they will be updated to the MYCS2 solution, to the new broadcast coordinates. So this will affect what you see out in the field. For Washington and Oregon, same thing. We'll have the last, which will be MYCS1 2018, and we'll be moving to MYCS2 2020 in Washington and Oregon. So all of this is here. And then where we have different legal requirements, such as in British Columbia, we'll have port 10,000 will have RTCM3, and again, we'll move to version 7.1 solution. We will have last available on 111 for RTCM IMAX Max VRS, CSRS V6 for 2010, or also have the current, the existing 1997 to 2002 coordinates available there as well. So those will continue to be available. So 2 questions that just came up as far as availability of mount points. No, you will not be able to. The question is, can we start using it MYCS2 prior to 2020? No, we will not launch those literally until January 6th. So the coordinates are not done. It requires a bringing down and restarting of the entire network to launch new coordinates. We will make the CSRS V6 and the MYCS1 mount points available on December 6th, so that you can go ahead and switch to those, so that you'll continue to use those coordinates. So we'll talk about that in a second. But as far as the new MYCS2 solution, no, it will not be available till January 6th. Another question is, what's the difference between RTCM3 and MSM? RTCM3 is GPS and GLONASS. MSM is the multi-signal message. That's the full GNSS solution. So if you just have a GPS GLONASS receiver, you can use RTCM3. If you have a full GNSS receiver, you can use MSM. Or if you have a GPS GLONASS receiver, you can probably also move to MSM as well, assuming you have current version firmware. And then for folks that are out there that are using a global reference frame, so this would not be surveyors, engineers, contractors, machine control, those type of folks. This would be automotive, drone, folks in that are operating in some of our newer touch points in the market. You'll see that. We'll have new ITR 14 mount points that are available on 9950, similar to what you've been running for a while. So those will be an ITR of 2014, 2020. We will maintain last RTCM3 IGS will maintain those mount points for again until spring adjustment time, and those will also fade away when we do our spring adjustment. So if you're a user of our IGS reference frames, then you will need to make that switch as well. These are only available for certain types of licenses, so if you don't know what I'm talking about here, you're probably not using them, so don't worry. So, Tyler, that's a lot of information. How do I know what I'm supposed to be on? Well, on the connection and configuration page, it will walk you through. It will tell you what mount point that you have available to you, what reference frame it's in, what epic it's in, and then if there's any additional mount points that are available to you to use. So you can see more, see less. You can see all of this on the connection and configuration page, and you can listen to the dulcet tones of my voice again if you want to watch this webinar again. So it displays connection details, reference frames, and epics that'll be available, and it will append that to also have under the reference frame also the realization or solution. So you'll see MICS2 or MICS1 or version 6 or version 7. You will see this in this table here in the not too distant future, like literally in the next couple weeks. This will be updated to start showing what is available for you to start working from. Okay, so know it's a lot of information. The short and skinny of it is, if you don't change anything, you're going to be moved to the new broadcast coordinates. It may or may not affect you depending on the station that you're connecting to and how much the coordinates get updated, but you need to be aware of it. And should you need to get back to the old solution, you can use one of the MRF mount points that allow you to use the coordinates that are operating today, the coordinates that you're accustomed to working with for the broadcast solution, and you'll have those available to you until the spring adjustment. So we have a question. What do we need to change in the mount point settings in our survey controller? Will the mount point automatically change on January 6th? If we want to go back to the old solution, do we need to change it back? All right, so here's what will happen. On January 6th, all of our production mount points, so MSM IMAX, MSM Near, Xeno, Mac, all the things without any type of indicator, like literally any type of indicator. And if it doesn't have an epic date, if it calls out MSM, or excuse me, MYCS1, if it doesn't have an indicator in the mount point that has a number or some other indicator that we've talked about, MYCS1, it will be in the new realization in the US and the new solution in Canada. So it will be MYCS2 in the US, version 7.1 in Canada. So all the standard mount points will move automatically, period. They'll get updated. You will not have to change anything. You'll get drugged to the new realization or the new solution so that we can make sure everybody continues to work. If you do need to go back to the last, if you do need to use the last, then you will need to make a change to the mount point that you are connecting to. So if you want to work in today's coordinates, literally what we are broadcasting today, what we'll broadcast up till 10 p.m. On January 5th, you will need to make a change. You will need to change to one of the multi-reference frame mount points, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. So another question is, will I be able to use GOA 2018 on the last mount points? No, you will not. They will not fit. So if you want to move to GOA 2018, you need to stay on current MYCS2 mount points for the US. As far as changes, updates, firmware required, there are no changes as far as updates to firmware that are required to do this. The only change you have to make, should you need to go back to the old coordinates, is to update the mount point that you are using. All right. So coordinate epic tracking. So the question is always, how do I figure out what the station's doing, what this broadcasting, yada, yada, yada. This tells you what the mount point is broadcasting here. So this mount point here will be updated, and it'll show NA 2011, MYCS2, Epic 2020, for example, if I was in California. Or it'll say Epic 2010 if I'm anywhere else. But it'll say what reference frame solution. It'll say solution V7.1 for Canada. It'll have all that. So that will tell you what the mount point is sending out. But if you want to know what the coordinates are for a particular station, you'll have to go to the portal. And in the portal, we'll have the processing coordinates. So that'll be ITRF, current epic when we get there. It'll have the common. So it'll have what is common now, which is NYCS2 for all stations. You'll see current. So you'll see NYCS2 Epic 2020 for high dynamic stations such as California, Washington State, etc. Last, you'll see in NAT83 and A2011 NYCS1 with the appropriate epic, whatever that was, that'll be available for all stations. And then any superseded coordinates. So any coordinates, so if we have had to make broadcast coordinate changes through the years to a particular station, but we haven't renamed it because it didn't fall outside that tolerance, et cetera, all of those things will be there as well. In Canada, the same thing. You'll see, oopsie, that should have said version 7.1. I apologize. So version 7.1, we don't have any high dynamic stations in Canada. This would say again version 6.0, and this would say version 6.0 as well. Excuse me, I'll clean that up on the back end for the next filming of this webinar. And then it also have the alternate 1 1997, alternate 2 2002 for Vancouver Island and BC mainland. This course is all under the site database. So you open the site database, you go to superseded coordinates, you'll have current information. It'll call out the reference frame with now the realization NYCS2 for US or version 7.1 in Canada, and then have all the beginning dates of loose, the current, the class, the adjustment date, view the coordinates, all that will be under there. And we are doing some underlying updates to the coordinate database to address some of these things. So if you look in there and things kind of look wonky for the next probably 2 or 3 weeks, if you submit a support ticket, we're going to say we're doing underlying updates to the database to start accommodating for these new things that are coming. So please don't freak out, but we will continue to work and update this database to make it a little bit more user friendly with all these new coordinate classifications and realizations and solutions that we're taking on. So all of these will be available, here in the next couple of weeks. All right, so we're going to go through some questions real quick. All right, questions that have been answered. Okay, we had what is the mount point? Hopefully we've answered that. So there are a lot of mount points that are available. MSM RTCM3. I would encourage you to go to the connection and configuration guide to start looking at those mount points. Again, it will be called out in the table what solution or realization it's on, what it's going to be moving to. Our standard mount points, so MSM IMAX, MSM VRS, MSM near, RTCM3 near, RTCM3 MAC, RTCM IMAX, all those will be updated to the new realization NYCS2 in the US or version 7.1 in Canada. That means the broadcast coordinates could change and be updated and drag you along. If you need anything different, you will need to refer to the connection and configuration guide or this webinar to kind of get a handle on what you need to do. Again, if the mount point does not have an indicator, either NYCS1, V6, epic indicator in it, then you can make the assumption that it is going to be in the current realization or solution for the country that we're currently working in. Will the slides be available? Yes, this is being recorded. Is this going to be different than December? No, December is going to be exactly the same, just different questions most likely. Can you send me the recording? It'll be posted. You'll have to go to the knowledge base to download it. It might automatically email you if you registered. I'm not sure. I can't remember if it actually automatically emails you, but it will be posted on the knowledge base for you. When will this be published and rolled out in Canada? US and Canada, same dates, January 6, 2020. Will we be publishing these? Does this mean the coordinates we receive from the RTK service will change? Whatever broadcast you're using, if you don't change a mount point, in the for broadcast coordinates, it will change. If you're using the IGS mount point, you would actually have to change to ITRF, to the new ITRF mount point for it to change. Low dynamic stations will still be in EPIC 2010. Yes, all stations that are not in high dynamic areas, that means basically 70 some percent of the country, 80% of the country, will remain in EPIC 2010 because that is the common EPIC for everything. So in the US and Canada, if you basically take out just the west coast of US and west coast of Canada, everything else will stay in EPIC 2010 as the broadcast coordinate. So IGS will be replaced by ITRF on the transition date. Yes, IGS 08 will be replaced by ITRF 2014. When we're localized, when we're working on a localized job, can I check the precision accuracy after the changes by checking into a known CP? Yes, you'll be able to check and see what the changes are into your localization by checking into a known point. How are heights of stations derived? Are the GNSS derived heights or actually orthometric heights? We've not leveled to any of our stations. As SmartNet, they're all GNSS derived. Everything being shown is East Coast or West Coast. What about mid-US or even better, Texas? How does it affect us? It affects everyone. Like literally everyone needs to be cognizant of broadcast coordinates changing. Everyone. If you are a SmartNet user, you need to be cognizant that the broadcast coordinates of a station could change. Will it change? Maybe. Again, we'll address that again in a second, but you need to be cognizant. Yes, it's going to affect everyone. How much will depend on the exact station. So that is going to be the tricky part. Mount points we use as Xeno units. How's it affected? Xeno mount points will be updated to the current reference frame in EPIC. Excuse me, the current realization and solution. Sorry. Can we start using MYCS2 prior to 2020? Nope, but you will be able to start using the MYCS1 mount points or the version 6 mount points. Talk about that again in a second. Will NAT 8397 2002 2010 continuing to be available in Canada? Yes, in British Columbia 1997 and 2002 will continue to be available, and then version 7.1 2010 will be updated for all the broadcast mount or the production mount points, and then you will have version 6.0 EPIC 2010 mount point available as MRF till spring adjustment. When will the knowledge base article reports on how much the individual broadcast coordinates will be changing? The knowledge base article for how much broadcast coordinates or the stations that fall outside the 35 millimeters will be changing. It'll be available as soon as we can get it up. It'll be up available before we publish on the 6th, but how soon, I can't guarantee at this point. But we'll get it up as soon as we possibly can. All right. All right, we'll go ahead and move on for a second. We'll come back for some more questions. So on the horizon, to try to address some of these long-term problems that we've had with stations that we've used as control in the past, dropping offline, those type of things, SmartNet has made a considerable investment in the deployment of what we call our super control program. This is a high accuracy subset, even higher accuracy subset of SmartNet stations that we will be used as underlying control as we go forward. Similar to NGS foundational course program. So NGS is actually working on a foundational course program where they're rolling out stations across the U.S. To be the foundational monumentation and control for the larger course network. All of these control stations have been, or we accepted into NGS cores program or into the NRCan program. So we're going to have NRCan derived coordinates and NGS derived coordinates on these stations so that we can use them in our adjustment. If we can get them accepted by IGS, we will, but that's a big thing. We're doing this to improve our daily solution availability for integrity monitoring. So, for example, if an NGS station, which we get data from, goes offline and we have no control over it, that means it could negatively affect the daily solutions. If the daily solutions are affected, then that causes integrity monitoring issues, and it also includes it also means that we can't use those daily solutions for commissioning a new sites. So that process could drag on. So those are two things we want to improve on. And it also improves consistency from adjustment to adjustment. Since we control these sites, these are on municipalities, buildings we know that are going to be there for a long time, so that they're not going to be unavailable or have to be moved, which could affect the overall consistency from adjustment to adjustment. So we've done a lot on this. We're not quite ready for like 100% prime time with it, but anything in green on this map is a super control site that is up and operational. Anything blue or purple are things that we're actively working on. So this is something that we're spending a lot of time on to make sure it's right. And we spend an inordinate amount of time, folks, on coordinates because it's literally the base of everything that we do. This question's come up a couple times. Tyler, is what we're talking about today the big crazy monster change that we've heard in with surveyors all around about the new NGS adopted coordinate system? No, this is a small step, but completely different. So this is just a realization update to the existing reference frame, but NGS is adopting a completely new reference frame in roughly 2022. This is a geocentric plate fixed reference frame called NATRF 2022. That's the North American Terrestrial Reference Frame of 2022. With it being now geocentric, it will differ from the current NAT83 frame by about 2.2 meters. But that's a big difference, Tyler. What happened? So basically right now, NAT83 and ITRF, so you've heard me say ITRF, IGS, there's an offset between those two coordinates by about 2.2 meters anywhere. And basically that means in the Cartesian space, if I went to the 0, 0, 0 point of both Cartesian coordinates, that their two 0, 0, 0s are off by about 2.2 meters. So they don't coincide. The new NATRF 2022 will make those 2 points coincide so that they fit better. Now, the good part of this is 2.2 meters of difference is a big difference. That means you go out, you know that there's a difference, as opposed to being a 3 centimeter difference. You might not catch that quite as well. But it's going to come. 2022 is their projected date. I'm going to guess late 2023, 2024, maybe, just based on what happened last time and when they released Epic 2010. It was actually late 2012 before they got it out the door. So it could be as early as 2022, most likely 2023, 2024. What does this mean for SmartNet users? Hold on to your hat, because it's a big monster change, but it doesn't affect us today. So you don't have to worry about that one today, but we wanted to call your attention to it because we didn't think when we talk about a new realization that we could go without talking about this, just to make sure that we weren't confused, that there's not a big 2 meter shift coming that you have to worry about. That's not today. That's not January 6th, 2020. That will be sometime in the future, 2022, 2023, when NGS has it ready. If you want to know more about the new datums for NGS, if you type in NATRF 2022, literally the first or second search item that you get will be the new datums link that you see here on the page. I encourage you to read up on it. It's pretty interesting. If you're a nerd like me, but it's really interesting to learn about how they're aligning these two new datums, or the new datum with the existing terrestrial datums, ITRF datums, and what it means for users, because there's some really awesome things coming with the new geoid model, really neat things that are happening. So I encourage you to read up on it, but it's not a today thing, not a January 6th thing. It's a 2022, 2023 thing. So you don't have to worry about it too bad. So wrapping up. We're going to get some more questions in a second, but we know some questions that were going to be asked, so we thought we would put them right here. How do I find out about the status of SmartNet? We have a lot of tools. We get asked this question all the time, status.smartnetna.com or stat.sna.co. You can go there if you want live status of a station. Live.smartnetna.com will take you right there. Or if you want to see what's going on in the Twitterverse, you can look at twitter.smartnet or /smartnetna, smartnet_na, or you can just look on the portal and it has all of that information there as well. The status is also linked at the bottom of this page, so you can find it there as well. Tyler, how do we find out more about this adjustment? We will continue to publish new adjustment and content in the coming weeks on this adjustment. So we'll continue to update the knowledge base with new content. Please visit the support.smartnetna.com web address, and content will be available. We'll have links to the NGS and NRCan content that we've referenced today. We will have a list of stations that change greater than 35 millimeters once we have the final processing run done and the QA and QC done. We will produce a list of all of those stations. We will have a link in an article specifically from multiple reference frames so that you'll have all that information about MRFs and how you get back and forth between multiple reference frame mount points. We'll have a recording of each webinar. So if you listen to this one, if you listen to the next one, if you listen to the third one, it will be there. The content, same slideshow for each one of them, so you don't have to feel like you need to attend unless you feel like you need to attend. Questions may be asked, may be different. We will timestamp those and publish the linked QA and QC or Q&A, and it will be published with timestamp links with my answers. That will take a little bit longer to get out, but we'll get the webinars out and then we'll get the Q&A answers out so that you can jump right to an answer if you need to. So all that'll be in there. Again, support.smartnetna.com. And then basically if you search keyword MYCS2, all this content's going to pop up for you, but most of it will be pinned right to the main page. So you'll be able to find it. So does it affect me for GNSS corrections? If you want to use a GNSS correction mount point, then yes, the GNSS mount points affect you. If you haven't already, you must update the mount point to be able to receive GNSS corrections. So if you want GNSS correction, you got to be on one of the MSM mount points. Have to, no questions. So please update. If you only care about GPS and GLONASS, then no, you don't have to update. But we would encourage you to move to MSM IMAX. We're not going to cut them off. We're not turning them off. But we encourage you to start making that move to get the newest whiz-bang GNSS feature should you need to. Adjustment effects. Does it affect me? Will the fall adjustment affect, will the, not the fall adjustment, will the broadcast coordinate adjustment affect the stations I use? Simplest answer is it may or may not, but go ahead and assume yes. Coordinates may change as little as 5 millimeters, but they may also change in excess of 5 centimeters. So make sure that you are ready for this change. This is not location or area dependent. This is literally station dependent. One station may move or have a new coordinate. It's not really moving. Have a new coordinate on it. And one other station may not have as big a change. Again, we will publish a knowledge base article with stations requiring changes of greater than 35 millimeters. But again, it's incumbent to all users to adhere to good surveying practices to assure changes do not have unintended consequences. So check into control. Be prepared to update your localizations, your transformations, your calibrations. Be prepared for that. You have the ability to use an MRF mount point, so you have the ability to get to the last coordinate class. You have the ability to get to an NYCS1 realization. You have the ability to get to a version 6.0 solution should you need to, so that you can use current day-to-day coordinates. But you still need to make accommodations for moving to the new realization or solution, because those MRF mount points will be going away. Will the MRF additions affect the mount point I use? Maybe. If you want to continue to utilize NYCS1 realization in the US, then yes, you have to change your mount point. If you want to continue to utilize version 6.0 solution in Canada, then yes, you have to change the mount point that you will be using. You have to go back to the old mount points, or to the NYCS1 or the version 6 mount points that have the old coordinates on old coordinate system on them. If you want to immediately utilize the new realization or solution, you will need to make accommodations on the rover. to your own localization, your own calibration, your own transformation, and you're going to make those changes and you're going to take care of it and you're not going to have to worry about it, then no, you don't have to change mount points. If you don't want to and you just want to run and roll with what the changes are, then you can leave the mount points as is and continue to operate. That's probably the safest method, again, so that you don't forget. And then spring rolls around and we do the transfer, we do the new adjustment, and we cut off those old mount points, and you're like, what happened? So I would encourage you to go ahead and make the jump, especially the time of the jump could be advantageous. Hopefully, you're not having to blow and go. It could be it could be bad in Canada or in the northern tier. You can't find your control points because they're under snow. But we will have both that are operating side by side. The new NYCS 1 mount points, the new version 6 mount points, with the today coordinates on them, will be available on on December 6th. So the coordinates that we're currently broadcasting, we will create new NYCS 1 and version 6 mount points so that you can go ahead and move to those if that's the course of action that you're going to use, so that on January 6th, you don't come in and you forget. Okay, so those mount points with the old coordinates will be available on December 6th. So you will have the ability to start using those immediately should you need to. Not the NYCS2 mount, not the new coordinates. Those coordinates, those mount points will not be available until January 6th. But if you want to go ahead and make the change so that you know you're going to have the old coordinates until the spring adjustment, you can make that change starting December 6th. Again, please remember, NYCS 1 and version 6 MRF mount points are going to be there for you. They're going to help you bridge the gap, but they will be deprecated. Okay, they will be changed. They will be turned off when the spring adjustment happens on 2020. That typically happens end of April, 1st of May. That means you need to perform your own localization, your own calibration, your own transformation using the new realization or solution as soon as it's available. So when it goes live, you need to update. Again, the NYCS 1 and version 6 mount points will be available on December 6th. The NYCS 2 coordinates will go live on production mount points on January 6th. Again, the reason that we're taking the NYCS 1 and version 6 mount points off out of use in spring of 2020 is because we can't assure consistency between new stations and old stations, new stations that get brought online and old stations with those velocity changes for very long. So please make accommodations for this. It will affect you going forward. So we show this in every webinar. And the thing that we want to call out here is one of the reasons. This is the commitment of what we're doing is how we make decisions on how we do things in operations every single day with SmartNet. And you can see on here, provide a stable and reliable infrastructure on a standard reference frame. That is one of the things that we base our operations off of. The standard reference frames are updating. They're going to NYCS 2 for NGS in the US, and they're going to version 7.1 for NRCan in Canada. So if we're going to adhere to this commitment, we got to make the move. We know it'll be it could be a possible small disruption, but it's not as bad as with the ability to have MRF mount points to stay on the old coordinates for a while. There's some ways to transition smoothly and seamlessly. So we were making as much as available as we can and trying to educate as much as we can. But we're committed to continue to move on these standard reference frames because it's better for everybody in the community to stay up to date on these new things. So questions. I got some more questions. I'm sure that we're going to have to answer more questions. Okay. You said you're switching to 2014 reference frame as a reference frame that NGS is. Okay, so this goes back to ITR 2014. It's in the back end. That's our physical coordinates. That's our processing coordinates. Updating those does nothing to affect you, except for improves the network corrections overall. The broadcast coordinates, when we change those, those are what affect you. There are small changes afoot, 5 millimeters to 5 centimeters for this broadcast coordinate update in the US and Canada. In 2022 is the NATRF update for NGS in the US. That's a 2-meter update. That is not what we're talking about here. We're only talking about today the adoption of a new realization and small changes to the broadcast coordinates. What do these changes mean for automotive applications? If we have maps creating IGS 08, do we have to redo the survey? IGS 08 and ITRF are relatively well aligned, so you shouldn't have a big change to handle, but I would encourage you for your particular applications to submit a support ticket so we can talk that off the line. CSRS PPP is adopting 7.0 with us match 7.1 SmartNet. Yes. So CSRS PPP, that's the NRCan PPP solution for basically NRCan Opus for guys in the US. They're currently on 7.0. They will adopt 7.1 in January, so we'll be a little bit ahead of the curve just because it aligns better with the timing of everything. But yes, it'll match up. Will MSM work with older receivers that are only GPS and GLONASS? Yes, assuming you have current version firmware, you should be able to use MSM without any issue, unless it's like a really old receiver. There might be a compatibility issue. To clarify, you will be able to upload the new mount points broadcast coordinates into the survey controller before they become available for prestigious. Okay, so you don't actually upload broadcast coordinates into your controller. We broadcast those in the actual correction. So when you connect into a station, or excuse me, when you connect into the network, one of the components of the message that we send out are the broadcast coordinates of the station that you're getting a correction from. So on today, November 19th, we are broadcasting in the US an MYCS1 solution, in Canada a realization, in Canada a V6.0 solution, excuse me, and that is what's being broadcast today. So if you're on the production mount, the standard RTCM3 _ IMAX mount point today, that is the coordinate that you are getting. On January 6th, you'll get an MYCS2 realization coordinate or a V7.1 coordinate in Canada. So we'll broadcast different coordinates on that date. If I want to stay on the coordinates that I'm on right now today, then yes, you would need to update your mount point so that you continue to receive the broadcast coordinates in the previous reference frame, or basically today's reference frame in realization. Hopefully that answered your question. Currently, I shoot in NGS stations and coordinate values match pretty close. Are y'all saying that they will not be the case after January 6th? No, they should be closer. So currently today, well, depending on how you're talking about NGS station. So if you're tying to a passive control monument that's in the ground, if you're talking about that, I don't know if they've updated all ground monumentation with the new NYCS2 solution. I don't know that they have, but that's a question. How you tie into passive control ground monumentation is really, unfortunately, irrelevant. I know that it seems like it's very relevant to most folks, but because that passive monumentation necessarily hasn't been reobserved in the same time period that the active reference stations have been collecting data. How they may or may not fit depends on where you are. I mean, in Louisiana, you got subsidence. In California, you got movement. And up north, you got glacial rebound. So there's always movement happening to the ground where a passive monumentation could be. We should be repeatable, meaning that if you tie into a point today, and you tie into a point tomorrow, and you tie into a point next week, when you tie in, our solutions that we provide should be consistent. or not necessarily fit exactly to what's on that. But yes, if you're talking about if I tie with Opus Solutions and I tie back into that point off of SmartNet, then yes, as we update after January 6th, the solution should be better because again, we're taking care of having better velocity models. We're getting a more current solution, more current realization, and things overall should fit better together. Does this change affect state plane coordinates? So state plane coordinates are only relative to the reference to NAD 83. So any change that's going to be a direct translation or change if I'm shooting in state plane or if I was shooting in raw NAD 83 coordinates, whatever the change is on one, it's going to affect the other. It's just state plane is a construct that's a little bit better understood from a coordinate system perspective on a smaller scale. So yeah, if there's a change in the reference station coordinate that you're on, it will be reflected in the same change in state plane coordinates. If you're already operating in an alternate reference frame, will the ports or mount points need to be checked after? No. So if I'm operating in one of the alternate reference frame 97, 2002, we're not changing the coordinates that are being broadcast on all of those. Those are fixed. Those are what they are. If new stations are added into BC, we would project them back to 97 or 2002 because there's already inherent error in 97 and 2002 because of how those reference frames were originally realized anyway. So there's nothing that we can do that would fix for that in a velocity model. So if we bring in new stations, we can get back to 97 or 2002 in BC because there's already inherent error there that just will be there. Do we need to manually change the mount points to get it running after the change? No. So when we make the change, the standard mount points that most everybody operates on, like the RTCM3 underscore IMAX, the MSM underscore IMAX underscore near underscore VIRS, those will move to the new reference frame. So you don't have to, we're going to drag everybody along. The only time that you have to change mount points, the only time that you have to change mount points is if you want to operate in one of the other reference frames. If you want to operate in today's coordinates, the November 18th or 19th coordinates, or the January 4th coordinates, the coordinates before the change, you will have to change mount points. If you don't care and you're just going to make the accommodations on the rover side, then you can just continue running as is, and you'll just see either most likely a small shift in your coordinates. Again, I want to reiterate, there can be a small change, no change, or a big change. We just want you to be aware that there could be a change. If you want to test both ways, feel free to do that. We will publish a knowledge-based article that has any stations that has a big change on it so that you will know and you will be able to reference that. We will publish new coordinates for all stations so you can go and look and see, these are the stations. I'm not a nomadic surveyor. I'm not going all over the place. I use a few stations every single day, mostly only these. You will be able to go see the new coordinates versus the old coordinates, and you'll be able to make that call for yourself if you need to adjust it. So that's an option that you will have. Can you elaborate on a suggestion of creating a localization for projects that need to use old coordinates? Thanks. If you don't know how to do localization, a calibration, or transformation, I encourage you to talk to your hardware rep that sold you or trained you on how to use your hardware. Should you want to stay on the old coordinates past spring, or need to relocalize or work. If you're an IGS reference frame user or something like that, we probably need to talk to drop a support ticket in. If our checkpoints deltas are acceptable with current and are currently using GEOID 12B, should we change to GEOID 2018? That's really up to you. That's a preference for you of what GEOID you want to be using. Once January 6th comes and you can move to GEOID 18 and you're using one of the standard mount points, then I would probably tell you to use GEOID 18 because the models are better. in 18. So it should give you a more represented orthometric height. But that's really a preference that you have to decide for yourself. When will the published documents be available showing the differences in the old stations versus new stations? Just as soon as everything's done. I know that's not a great answer, but we will publish the big change stations just as soon as possible. We will not publish the deltas. We'll just say this is about more than 35 millimeters, and then you will have to go look at the coordinates of the stations. But we'll that way you'll just know. The idea there is that you'll know, oh, I use this station a lot, so I need to be aware of this. That's the idea behind it. Is not to is to make you aware of the station, not necessarily show you the coordinates. We already have a place for the coordinates that are going to be there, so you'll be able to look at the coordinates of that station. So we're not going to we're just going to call it out so that you know, oh, I need to make an adjustment. I need to make an accommodation for this in the way that I process in my workflow, how my field crews are doing it, and we leave that up to you how the best you want to handle that is. But we will show all the stations that are going to be greater than 35 millimeters, and we will call that out specifically so that you have that available to you to go look at the differences. We will get those up just as soon as we possibly can. I would guess sometime, honestly, mid to late December. Like I said, the processing run is 2 weeks. It takes about 18 hours to process each day. We got 14 days of data to process. So best case is, first, second week of December to get into final QA/QC. So probably mid to late December. Yes, this recording will be available for playback. There'll be basically probably two publishings of this. There'll be a publishing pretty soon, so probably by tomorrow, that we'll have it up. We'll start timestamping, going back through the Q's and A's and doing timestamps on those so that people can listen to the questions and the answers. If that's all they want to listen to, that will probably be early next week, I would guess, when we get that back up. And then we will be conducting the same webinar again on November 10th and November 19th. So if you want to hear it again, and you want to hear it live as opposed to a recording, so you can ask another question that popped into your head, feel free to attend. If you have somebody else in your organization that you feel like would benefit from this, we would also encourage you to have them attend as well. Okay, questions are slowing down. I think we've answered about 56 of them. Sharam, if you're still on, feel free to ping me. You can answer your question offline. Dustin, I think your question got answered. Naveen, again, if you're online, you feel free to ping me on that question. Okay, guys, we're about 12 minutes over right now, so we're going to call it for the day. But again, if you feel like you have more questions that you want to answer, I'd encourage you to watch the webinar again. We're always here to answer questions. There's going to be a lot of questions, boys and girls, that get generated in the Citizens of Support. So please be patient as we answer them. Most likely, you'll get referred back to either this webinar or future webinars, so that you can look at them. So please reference these as we go forward. Attend to other webinars if you feel like you need to. I know it's a big change, possible big change for you. So we're here to help as much as we can. There's a lot of things going on in the next few weeks as we get through this. So please, if you drop a support ticket in, you get reference back to a knowledge base article or a webinar or something, don't take offense. We will get back through those towards the back end as well. All right, guys, thanks a lot. And we're going to close this down today. Thanks for attending. And since we probably won't talk to you again, happy Thanksgiving. If you're here in the States, eat some turkey and enjoy the holiday next week. Thanks.